Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeremy Simon with 3D Universe. I'm very pleased to welcome you to another session in our ongoing webinar series, 3D Printing in the Workplace and STEM Education. And this session is a wonderful panel discussion with a topic of 3D printed prosthetics and K12, e-NABLE in the classroom. We've got a great group of panelists for you today. I'm going to introduce first one of the co-founders of the e-NABLE volunteer community, Jen Owen, who's going to give us a little bit of an overview of what e-NABLE is. And then from there, we'll introduce the other panelists and get going. So Jen, over to you.
Hello. I am Jen Owen, and I am a co-founder of e-NABLE, which is a global community of makers and in the maker community who are using their 3D printers to make free prosthetic hands and arms and assistive devices for those in need. Recently, we have also expanded to creating PPE and sorry, I got a notification, personal protective equipment for those in need. And we've had a lot of schools who have joined us over the years. We're at least 2,000 schools worldwide. e-NABLE is in over 100 countries. And we have probably about 30,000 or more volunteers. We have been doing this for about 8 years now. And I'm excited to hear from a couple of our other co-founders, John Schull, who's on this panel, and Shashi, who has been part of e-NABLE since pretty much the beginning, and also to get to experience some really awesome teachers who have brought e-NABLE into their STEM classrooms. I think that e-NABLE has been able to bring a new way of learning for STEM that wasn't really there before, where we're able to teach kids empathy and how to design for others, not just for a basic classroom project. So I am going to open this up to Neesha, who is going to be our moderator today, and asking some questions so that we can hear from all those awesome people that I just mentioned.
Great. Thank you, Jen. This is so exciting that we're getting to do this. So I would just like to ask all of the panelists, you can now turn your videos on, and if you are an attendee, you can choose to see this either in the matrix view, or you can see it in speaker view. You probably want to look at it in speaker view. The chat is enabled, and so is the Q&A. Jen and I are going to moderate the chat and the Q&A. And yeah, I'm so excited to do this. I think, as we're sitting here all stuck at home and hearing the news about the pandemic all the time, I mean, yes, there has definitely been a pandemic of fear. Yes, there has definitely been a pandemic, the COVID pandemic, but there's also been a pandemic of helpers that have come to the table. And, you can just hear that and see that in what Jen has just said. And if you've been watching this global hackathon go down also of all kinds of makers that have come together to really, make PPEs, but also just whether it's students or teachers or whatever it is, problem solvers, really, all people coming together. So we're really excited to do this panel around how, and I know that it's hard to think about getting back to school, but when we get back to school, and for those of you that have 3D printers, what's the next piece of impact that you can bring to your students? And our intention here today is really to bring together educators from across elementary school, middle school, high school, as well as Shashi, who has used this with another group that he will talk about, all so that you can hear the lessons learned and hopefully hear the challenges and the opportunities of bringing this kind of work, the e-NABLE program specifically. So that is 3D printing prosthetics to your students. So with that, I'd like to introduce John. John is another co-founder of e-NABLE. And John, do you want to just get us started here with what your intention was when you started e-NABLE and you got involved, and what your work has looked like in the K-12 space in particular. I know it's been more than that, but yeah, that'd be great. You're on mute, by the way.
And now I'm not. Okay,
Now you're not.
there you go.
Yeah.
So I have spent much of my career in university education, but right from the start, it was clear that e-NABLE was something that was breaking the barriers of professionalism and educational boundaries as well. I know that Jen and Andrea, who works with me at the charter school that I moved to just 3 or 4 years ago, will say more about education and the specific programs. So I just want to make a few general comments about this whole thing. First of all, I think what's really important about e-NABLE and relevant to education and relevant to what Neesha has just observed about how we're all out of school and it's hard to think about getting back to real life, is that in some ways what we're doing and what e-NABLE is doing right now is frankly more real than what happens when you take 10 to 30 kids, you line them up in rows and you have them sit in chairs for the day. e-NABLE is about doing things, learning how to do what you need to do, and then making a real contribution regardless of your formal education, certifiable qualifications. And we have had kids in classes and outside of classes of many ages making real contributions. We have started with prosthetics, as Jen notes. We are, of course, this month and last month expanding rapidly into personal protective equipment as much as we can. But the really radical thing about e-NABLE, and the thing that I think is really important to think about in your classes, is that beyond 3D printing or any particular product like a prosthetic or a personal protective equipment or anything else that begins with P or any other letter in the English or other alphabet, is the activity of helping children and adults, and that includes the teachers, recognize that we're not just here to evaluate and train kids about how to get good grades or merely expand their educational horizons, but we're giving them the ability to make a real difference perhaps for one person who gets a prosthetic, perhaps for many people who get a bunch of personal protective equipment, perhaps for some other kids or teachers who are liberated to realize that with the internet technologies that we're using, especially now that we're out of school, and that the kids are using when they are out of school, and with all the availability of information, it's an opportunity really to blow open the whole question of what is education, what is learning, what really matters. This is a really good moment to do that. And I think e-NABLE has been somewhat ahead of the curve on this, and that the work that you all are doing in the classrooms is preparing your students for breaking out of the classroom, whether the classroom exists or is virtual or not. The point is, they can all make a real difference. And as an educator, let's just recognize that when they know that, they really learn. They don't just learn how to get a good grade, they learn how to do it. Whatever the important it is, that's what really motivates them. So in some ways, that's sort of my larger e-NABLE story, is that we're a global network of liberated, connected humanitarians who have found that we can do things outside of organized structures that the organized structures either fail to do or are perversely organized to prevent people from doing. That's me.
That's great. Yes. And I just, I will say that as we were considering what should a good topic of a panel be, to be of most use to teachers at this time, this came up specifically because it is true, right, that the antidote to despair is action, and giving students the opportunity to feel a sense of purpose and then empowering them to act on the world is just so much more important now So yeah, thank you, John. And it's such a pleasure to be doing this with all of you at e-NABLE, you, Jen, Shashi, Jeremy, who introduced us, who's another co-founder of e-NABLE. It's really amazing. So with that, we will go to introducing each of the other panelists. And if you could also, as part of your introduction, talk about what's the one goal that you met when you brought the e-NABLE program into, introduced it to your students, and talk a little bit about the way in which you introduced the e-NABLE program to your students. So I'm gonna start with Andrea, because I know that Andrea and John have worked together on this. And Andrea teaches at the high school level, so we'll go from high school and come down to the elementary level.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Andrea, as she said. I am a high school teacher. I mainly teach physics, but I basically taught everything in STEM that you could imagine at this point. John and I started working together about, I think, what, a year and a half ago, maybe almost 2 at this point. Very out of nowhere, John came to me in the teacher's lounge and was like, hey, I heard you're the physics teacher. And I was like, okay, yes, that is me. I was like, I got to talk to you. And since then, I haven't been able to leave the lab somehow. It started really with just a natural curiosity of myself. I had played with 3D printers before in college, but never really dived deep. My concentration was astrophysics. But I was really interested in the work that we were doing. I knew they were doing 3D printed prosthetics. I knew they were working with the students, and all of my students were abuzz. How can I get in the program? How can I get in the program? It seemed like this mystifying kind of room in the school that no one really knew how to penetrate, the teachers or the students. And I really wanted to kind of bridge that gap between e-NABLE being something that's at our school, but not really accessible to all of our students. So it started with me really getting to know e-NABLE and what they do. And another person that we work with named Melvin Cruz really pioneered the summer program with our students, but I wanted to integrate it into the actual curriculum as a 4-credit course. So it's not just for those students that are excelling at school and can afford to lose some of those class hours in the summer. So the way we've structured our program is kind of moving in sections, and based on how you advance is how you get rewarded, you could say. It starts with a 3D printing class with me, learn basics in 3D printing. It's literally called Essentials of 3D Printing. Everything from CAD design to using a slicer to just basic maintenance of a 3D printer. I want to be very clear, I am in no way an expert in any of those 3 things, and that I think is one of the things I wish that I could have told myself before is it's okay to not know. A lot of the times your students will help you, your peers will help you, and that is how you really truly build a good community. I always start my class with saying, no one's gonna know everything, everyone's just gonna be really good at one thing, and that's gonna make the whole team come together. And that's really what I've seen in my classes and in the lab. So after they learn all the essentials of 3D printing, they move on to our summer program, which is really more e-NABLE focused. They learn about prosthetics, they learn about the history of e-NABLE and why we're doing what we're doing. And what I think is really cool about the partnership we have at e-NABLE, at re-NABLE specifically in Rochester, is that we also have Melvin, who I mentioned before. He is a co-founder of Guala, which is another extension or arm of e-NABLE in Honduras. So we're able to collaborate and give those students that kind of international feel as well. Last summer, we had the opportunity to actually have an intern from Honduras come and be with us for the full summer program. What's really good about that summer program as well is that a lot of our students are at risk. They come from really low income homes. So the summer program, they don't earn credit for it, but it is during school hours at school and they get paid. So it's a nice way for them to have some summer income, but then also give them that extra motivation to come to school. After they finish the summer program and they leave with a e-NABLE certificate or re-NABLE certificate certifying that they are 3D e-NABLE technicians. They're not 3D printing technicians, they're specifically e-NABLE prosthetic technicians. From there, we pick the best batch of our technicians, usually 2 to 3, and they can work after school during the normal fall or spring semester. That program is a little bit more specialized in what they can do in the industry. This was the first semester that we were fortunate enough to do it. And I guess, unfortunately, it kind of got ruined by this disaster, but the idea is that they will be trained in more industrial techniques, maintaining 3D printers, and more engineering style kind of lab management. And then from there, we had a couple links with a few industries so they could actually get an internship for the summer. So we're going to do a couple tours of some educational labs. We're going to do a couple tours of some engineering labs so they can see different facets of, this isn't something that if college isn't for you, you can still go be a lab technician with the skills that you learned here in school. So it's not just 3D printing is cool. It's let me give you skills that you can use after high school if you're finding that college isn't for you, you don't know what to do. So that's kind of the gist of the program. And what I think is really important is that a lot of the times, and I fell into this hole, you think of only the science students are going to be interested in this, only the really, what traditionally you think are math or science Excel students. But this semester, I got a really weird bunch of students. It's 6 students in a class. So, you usually have to have a good dynamic, right? Because if not, it can get really awkward at times. Those that have had small classes might know what I mean. But in a way, it worked so that every little student learned a little bit from each other. We had a student that really excelled at art. So when we were doing our CAD, he was amazing. He was like, oh, I love this teaching. Even taught me some things. And I was like, oh, you can do that with Tinkercad? What? So I think what's really important about 3D printing and really the message that e-NABLE has, and John kind of touched on it, is it's not just this one really niche community. It's expansive and can really include all types of forms of ideas and thinking and people and I think that's what makes e-NABLE work.
That's great, Andrea. It's really cool to hear how you were able to bring so many different types of students to the table, as well as bring in that real world skills building aspect to allow high school students to see what could possibly come next for them with the skill. So that's awesome. Michael, can you introduce yourself? Michael is the principal of a middle school in California. And yeah, Michael, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I'll be brief because I think the real star of the show is I'm lucky enough to be on this panel with Aaron Satilli, who teaches science and engineering at our school, Calaveras Hills Middle School in Carlsbad, California. And I just wanted to say a couple things because we talk about e-NABLE and where that fits. And I think John, to start with some of the things that he said, is about purposeful work. And something that Aaron and I co-created and co-thought through in the way that we wanted to design a middle school and have the opportunities for students that exist is that we want curiosity to be really high up there. We want students to be more curious about learning when they leave than when they come, because I think that one of the big concerns that I see is the year in, year out Gallup survey, which tells us that the engagement rates sort of dip in a big way down into the 40s when they get to middle school, going from 5th grade, and into the 30s by the time they get to high school. And that for teachers, for staff too, we're talking about a 30% engagement rates. That's a catastrophe for our schools. And purposeful learning for both the adults and kids in schools is essential. And then to just jump on some of the work that they do in high school, we often think of this pathway between the world of school and the world of work to start in high school. If you look at the accountability measures out here in California, they're all focused on what are we doing in high school, and students start to eliminate options for themselves as early as elementary school. So to be able to attach student interest to student opportunity, and not only within school, but beyond it, is essential. And so these two elements combine for this opportunity to be doing work that matters. And what I would say to every principal out there that is thinking about this program is that your role and what I've been able to do is really just meet people, like having the chance to meet Neesha, having the opportunity to be introduced to John. There is a world out there to be connected to that could offer learning that is purposeful, that is meaningful, and that is relevant for students to attack really, I think, what is the biggest issue, and that is engagement rates of both students and staff. So with that, I'll pass it back to Neesha so you could pass it on to Aaron so he can talk about specifics of the program.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Michael. So great to have you on here as well today. Aaron, I know that I'll be transparent. Michael is a principal at a school that my kids have gone to, and Aaron has taught both of my kids. And so this is a special double treat. Aaron, if you would like to introduce yourself and the work that you've done, and then specifically around the goals that you met too, or when you brought the e-NABLE program into the students at Calavera Hills.
Yeah. And thanks, Neesha, for having me. This is a really neat experience for me coming in because, the people that I'm on the panel with are people that I've kind of bit of a fanboy of, because I've met them through the e-NABLE and through the research work as I first started learning about the program. And so it's really kind of neat to be talking about this together at this point. But I'm a science teacher by background. I've been teaching science at the middle school level for 20 years now, and specifically came into the 3D printing aspect of things and the e-NABLE program through a course that I teach through Project Lead the Way called Design and Modeling. And Design and Modeling looks at teaching students about the design process and how to use the design process for good. The course focuses initially on the condition of cerebral palsy. And so then it led me to get in contact with our North County Consortium for Special Education to try to teach students more about the empathy process involved in the design process. So we teamed up with the North County Consortium of Special Ed, and we brought in a lot of experts to talk about speech and language pathology, and to talk about occupational therapy and physical therapy and assistive technology, to be able to learn about different ways to use the design process to help others. And I think that's kind of at the mission of one of the things that we accomplish by teaming up with organizations like NICSE or teaming up with the Enabling the Future Foundation, is that idea of using empathy to inspire action on the part of our students, and so that they can see themselves as capable of making change and capable of having a positive impact. But what happened was kind of interesting. When we were teaming up with the folks at NICSE, the physical therapist had heard a little bit about the e-NABLE room, and she kind of offered up a challenge. She said, "Hey, you've got these 3D printers. What are you gonna do with them?" And brought me some information about e-NABLE, and I had a TA at the time that had taken some interest in it, and she took on the challenge to build our first hand. And we learned all kinds of challenges in the process of being able to print these things and put them together. But the files that are shared are pretty readily accessible, and I can talk later about some of the tips that I've learned about putting those in the hands of students and empowering them to be in charge of the fabrication and assembly of the devices. But that one TA started doing, building the hand off to the side, got the attention of a couple of the other students in the class. Well, next semester, I had two TAs that wanted to sign on to continue that work. And realized that I also needed to have experts in the class on how to run these different machines. I think most of us that are coming into 3D printing and using it in education are not native to that world. It's kind of a new world, and there's definitely a learning curve in it. But putting students in charge of problem solving around how to use a 3D printer, how to batch print, how to assemble these components was a valuable thing. And these students, these two TAs, well, they built more hands. And then we tried to figure out, how do we do this with a larger group? How do we take this to a whole class of students? And so then that's what we worked on together with the TAs, and they became kind of the experts in rolling this out with a class of students, and that became their area of expertise. And now the past year, we've had whole classes tackle an e-NABLE event and running an e-NABLE event in the context of the class as a part of one of the units that we do on design. So most recently now, we've had up to 30 students working in teams of 4 or 5 that are attacking the files. They're batching out the different components of the hand. They're actively printing and assembling and testing those finished devices. And as far as goals go, I think that there's so many things that students learn by participating in this project. That they're able to move forward, that they're encouraged to problem solve, they're encouraged to use the design process for good. It's been a really neat partnership, and then to see the work that they do in the within the four walls of the school expand out into the world, and to have that opportunity to be connected to a movement that's bigger than them.
Yeah, I think that that's really been so key for students, right? It's so motivating to see that your work matters and it does something really and truly out there in the world. And it also gives you not just a sense of pride, but a sense of wanting to be very careful and thoughtful about what you're learning and how you're putting it together, because you know that it matters. So yeah, thank you, Erin. Shashi, if you could introduce yourself. I know you've been involved with the e-NABLE community from the beginning and have worked with both adults and students. But if you could tell us about your student experience, that would be great.
Yeah, happy to. First of all, I gotta say, I'm just kind of in awe of all the teachers here who are doing some amazing work. My mom was a teacher, and you know, I get to tell her the stories of all of your stories, really. I am coming from a different place. I am not a teacher that teaches in a school. I teach innovation and entrepreneurship to high school students on the weekends. I'm also founder of a big 3D printing meetup. There's 1,800 of us. It's called the Portland 3D Printing Lab. And that group has done e-NABLE hands. So we've made, I think, over 350 hands between those that we've done in the group and those that we've done with corporations. So my day job is with Intel Corporation. So I'm doing, I'm a strategic innovation manager, and I apply these things like design thinking and customer empathy, and I teach this stuff internally, but I also apply that to Intel products. So I have this kind of weird mix of skills that have kind of brought me to this. About 6 years ago, I got my first 3D printers, and you know, what popped up was this amazing effort, which is about I don't know, 150 miles away from me, centered in Bellingham, Washington. I'm in Portland, Oregon. And it was to apply 3D printing to make prosthetic hands. So I ended up being about one of the first 100 people in. And it really just kind of transformed the way that I looked at my own skill set, but the impact that we could have with a hobby. I mean, what we're able to do with, admittedly, it's they're really rough looking machines, but they're able to transform lives in ways that are unexpected. And if adults can see that, then certainly kids, you know, growing up with that, imagine the world that they're going to build when that's just a normal thing, that they can turn their ideas into reality just like that, you know. So I had been doing some work with corporate e-NABLE, and inside of Intel, we built hands. We've delivered those out to recipients all over. But I stopped doing that when I just kind of by chance, you know, Jen had sent me an Eagle Scout that wanted to work with me on e-NABLE as a project. And then I found more and more Eagle Scouts wanting to do this project because it really resonated with them. So for those of you who don't know, Eagle Scouts are kind of like the final stage of Boy Scouts. So they go through years and years of training, of getting badges, of building up these amazing skills, and then they have to apply them at the end of their tenure when they're 17 or 18 to one big project that serves the community. And a lot of times these projects are really, you know, small things like organize a bunch of students and go clean out garbage from a park, or go build some planters, or there's a local nonprofit called Free Geek that gives computers to kids and teaches them how to use them. And it's an amazing program. But what e-NABLE allowed me to do is take this project that would show leadership for the students in a small community, and it allowed me to expand their idea of community from one city block to the entire world. And there's magic in this. These Eagles, they realize that they've gone through so many different trials to get these badges, that they've gone and they can do these things. They have this sense of possibility, but they don't know just how far they can take it. and we show them. And that's the most amazing part of this. So what it looks like is, I'll even show you here. In the chat, I'm going to put in 2 links that document 2 of the eagles that I've been working with. The first thing that we do is we establish a contract with the eagle. It's their process, not mine. And we lay out what it is that they're going to do. So we ask them, usually what they ask to do is, we want to build a lot of hands. We want to get those into recipients' hands. I mean, no pun intended, sorry. But we say, you know, that's an easy thing to do. What is it that you could do that would be really long lasting? What is it that you could do that would have an impact on people that are in communities that you have not even been to, or, you know, for people that don't look, act, or think like you? And we came up, the very first eagle I worked with was named Gokul Kaladi. He documented this phoenix hand. So this was the most popular hand at the time. And one of the problems that we had was it was difficult to, once you've 3D printed all the parts, you know, figure out which pin goes to which knuckle and so on and so forth. Anyone who's familiar with e-NABLE will have been through that pain. So we came up with this idea of doing a mat of basically, it's like a dinner placemat, but it has all the parts printed out at scale, so you can put them on the mat before you assemble a hand. But that idea had been there. The magical part was you flip it over and the entire instructions for assembling the hand are on the other side in IKEA format. So there's 0 words. It's all actions. It's all arrows. It's all showing. It's all about giving people enough information that they can take that next step, and inspiring them to continuing action until they've built this amazing little prosthetic hand. And it's a really transformative thing to watch these eagles, these Eagle Scouts do this. They start with, the process now is we establish this contract with them. They have to do 3 big things. They have to take a new hand model that hasn't been documented. They have to meet the founder of that model. They have to assemble one themselves and earn the badge that everyone else has to earn. Then they have to build a few of them to show that they can teach others how to do it. And then they have to document everything that they've done in this assembly mat. So I have 3 other eagles who've been working at this for the last year or so, and they're all doing different models of e-NABLE hands right now. And it's remarkable to see how each of them has taken on a skill of their own and found their own way of personalizing and adding to this, and how they've encouraged others to bring in their skills. So one of the eagles said, you know, the stuff you're asking me to do, he said this, like, it's too easy. You know, I gave him 6 months worth of work, and he's like, oh, no, that's too easy. I'm going to go and do a fundraiser on top of this. And so this guy's the student, I'm so proud of him. He's a professional. I mean, he's like he's not an amateur violin player. He is a musician, and he put on this musical show and did a fundraiser for e-NABLE and brought in like $1,500 for the cause, on top of all these other things that we asked him to do. But you could see, you know, that when he saw just how much impact he could have, he started thinking in these bigger terms, and he brought these other scouts along with him. So that's why I do this. This is what I think the goal could be for e-NABLE, is to expand the world of these students just a little bit more, and you know, give them this sense of possibility that is not just at their community but worldwide. So I'm going to pause there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Shashi. It's so good to hear about the kind of work that you've done outside of the school system and with Eagle Scouts. Especially right now, I think, you know, as we're all or so many of us, especially the students and definitely the adults, are experiencing the kind of anxiety that we're all experiencing, and you think about just the neurobiology around it and the kind of cortisol that's coursing through all of our brains, and the norepinephrine that's coursing through all of our brains, it does lead just naturally to focusing in on only 3 things: flight, freeze, or fight, right? And the real way that has been documented by scientists to get around that, the immediate fast way, is to expand your vision. So as you're narrow, it's to actually just expand your vision. And I think what you just said around opening up the world of possibilities is one of those things that you could do for students right now to get them out of fight, flight, or freeze. And that's just awesome. So thank you for sharing that. Amanda, you are our teacher, our only panelist here that's at the elementary school level. And it's pretty cool how you brought the e-NABLE program into your school. You did it as an assembly, and I just want to ask, a couple of questions here to you. So, fill in, of course, your introduction there, but also, how did you decide to do that? And what did it take to convince the administrators at your school to do that? And what do you wish that you had known now that you have done this as an assembly with as many students as you did? So I know that's a lot of questions there, but I can repeat them for you.
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, she's in Amanda Scampini. I'm at Peck Elementary School. We're actually a pre-K through 4th grade. So our big kids are like 3rd and 4th graders. We, in the past few years, have done a whole week for Computer Science Education Week. And we were looking for kind of our big kickoff activity. What are we going to do this year? And we already had a partnership relationship with BitSpace. They'd been helping us build out our makerspace, and we kind of were piloting some of the curriculum. So we brought them in, and BitSpace's relationship with e-NABLE had just begun somewhat recently before that. So it kind of all just happened. And what we had decided to do, we did do 2 assemblies. One was for the 3rd and 4th graders, and one was for K through 2. The 3rd and 4th graders saw the assembly first, and then after that, they actually went back and they had hour-long sessions where they actually helped build the prosthetic hands. So they used Shashi's mats and actually laid out all the pieces. They took turns and were able actually to assemble the hands in groups. The assembly was really cool because it really focused not just on, it started out not necessarily talking about e-NABLE, but talked about just like how 3D printing is used. We had 3D printers for a couple of years. They were more just kind of really fun. Like, oh, what can we print on this? Just kind of trying to figure out how they worked. And bringing in e-NABLE really showed them how a 3D printing used in the real world. How can it help people and animals? I have to be honest, the dog prosthetics got to us too. But how could we use these things that we have in our school to help others? And again, the word empathy has been talked about a couple of times. How do we even bring this to little guys? Like, how can they empathize with this? We really had the goal of them experiencing empathy. And that also one of our goals was the message that you can help even now. You don't have to wait till you're in high school or an adult, but there are things that you can do now as younger kids to really help this out. And I think it really was meaningful to them to know that these hands that they helped put together would actually go to a student or another child that needed them, and they were able to write little notes to the people who were going to get them, and they were very heartwarming. It was very cute. So yeah, it really meant a lot to them. The whole day meant a lot to all of us. It was really nice. So I don't know what other questions. Sorry.
No, that's really good. I think that you covered a lot, and the only thing that I'm wondering is, was there any real convincing involved, or was it, and I realized too that I didn't actually explain what BitSpace is, so I'll do that in a minute.
Luckily for us, we've been working on, we were certified as a STEM school. It's actually something that's in our culture at this point. Like, reading lessons, literacy lessons involve STEM projects. Like, it's just something we do. So luckily there wasn't a lot of convincing that had to happen. I would say for schools that science and STEM isn't their top priority, just bringing in the empathy, and I think that direction of it you can't argue with that. So I think that might be, if schools have to do a little more convincing, that would be the angle to take. But yeah, luckily there wasn't much convincing involved.
That's really great. And I know that the entire BitSpace team was just so thrilled to get to do this assembly as well. And the heartwarming stories that came out of it later of students and the impact that it had on students was really just a, we're still talking about it. So just really quickly, what is BitSpace? Who are we? For those of you who don't know, we started off in Chicago as 2 youth-only maker spaces and have worked with 6,000 students and 100 schools in the Chicago area. And really what we do is we test our programs directly with students. Our guides test the programs directly with students. And then from there, we then take it out and we deliver field trips and professional development opportunities. And now a lot of what we offer is online. So whether that's student workshops and courses that our guides deliver, or online PD. So that's just a little bit about what BitSpace does. Erin, I would like to come back around to you. You had started to say something about what you wish you had known, or tips and tricks that you can share from your experience with students. So if you could share a little bit more about that, what do you wish you had known before you got started? And also, if you were to do it all over again, would you just have started with the club, or would you have gone with the Project Lead the Way angle and brought it in that way?
Thanks, Neesha. That's an interesting second question. I'm not sure. I like embedding the project in that STEM elective course, because those students, they've kind of signed up for a deep dive into the design process. But I definitely see the project lending itself to any class that wants to, do a deep dive in the design process and design for good and connect to an outside agency. So I'm not sure on that one, but things that I wish I had known, I would say it's not so much that as, I think it's okay for anybody that's looking at getting started with this to give yourself permission to know that you don't have to know all of it. That it's okay to figure this stuff out. I remember when I was first doing the training around the course, I'd never seen a 3D printer or 3D printed anything. I have nothing in my background that would prepare me for that. And I remember being in a room full of people that had taken CAD classes and done that stuff for a living beforehand. And I was the kid that stayed late in that class every day because he didn't get it and he didn't understand how to use Autodesk and how to jump in and do the design components. But one thing that I think has really helped me working with my students is this idea of democratizing that design process and being able to really be okay with making sure that my students are the ones that are the experts in the room, that we establish a lot of different experts with being able to run machines, being able to see the constraints around creating the hand as being an opportunity for learning. And so one of the really cool side effects, the way that we've approached the project, if you look at the files, you can't print all of those on the format 3D printers that we have in the classroom. Like, you cannot print a single hand. And that was one of the first challenges that we came across when we were working with students. Looking at this going, well, wait a minute, this is 42 hours worth of printing, and it's gonna be on a bed that needs to be 2 feet long, which doesn't exist for us. And so I remember, just asking that with Stephanie, the first TA. I was like, well, how are we gonna do this? And she was the one that came up with the idea of like, well, can we break these things apart and print them in pieces? And we call it batch printing. And so we have the students kind of the files, and so they look at getting the fingers and the phalanges together, and then getting the palm block together in a separate print, getting the gauntlet together in a separate print. And what's really cool about that approach and having the students start with that beginning file that has everything in it is they have to become very dexterous with working with 3D files, with sharing files, with importing and exporting designs. And the students develop this mastery of that. And I think that's really, really neat. So that component, and then also the idea of using Google Docs and being able to use a Google Doc that's shared and editable amongst an entire class. So that way, what students can do is, like, I'll have them, and I'm happy to share out a link to a sample one that's been developed by my most recent class. They take screenshots of their designs, and then they hyperlink to their STLs, or to, Tinkercad now has sharing capacities embedded, which is really cool. But then they can share those, and then my TAs are experts at running the machines. But now I've got 5 machines in the classroom, so we kind of have I'm getting to the point almost where each group that's working on a hand can have one printer assigned to them, so like that's pretty cool. They get their one printer that they need to work on, and then they keep coming back. They'll come back at lunch to check on their prints and make sure things are going well. They'll come back after school to start another one to get something going for the next day. But being able to batch out those files and then share them in a way that allows me to see class progress and see where students are and see who's stuck, that has been a really useful tip and technique that I've been working with that's helped students when you're working with a whole class. And in the middle school level, I think what's really cool, like Amanda talked about doing the assembly and having the parts printed, and then Andrea's talking about doing the real design components. And I see the middle level that we're doing is kind of a nice happy medium there. So the students are in charge of the files. They're learning how to work with the files. They're doing full construction of the hands. They're doing the stringing. They're doing the thermal molding. And then they leave hopefully curious and they want more. They want to go on and maybe take more CAD design classes, take more certifications. And then also just starting to hopefully open their lens up on the design process, because this one's kind of, it's a pretty well-defined problem, but I like the idea of an ill-defined problem as the next iteration. It's like, okay, cool. Well, here's one way to use the design process in 3D printing in order to solve a problem. How else can you use it? Where else can you see yourself as a problem finder and a problem solver? Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's great. And I think that we will have requests for that Google Doc, and also for a bit more information on batch printing, because that is such a key tip that you just shared there. So thank you. Erin, so as the principal of the school that Erin teaches at, I know you're one of the best kinds of principals. You start with yes, but so you probably would have said yes almost anyhow, because that's the kind of leader you are. But what do you think that other administrators would have to know before they say yes? And what was important to you?
So, I mean, I referenced earlier about my concern about engagement in general. And I think part of the reason we have engagement issues in schools is because we have a model that kind of doesn't prize it or pushes it away even. So, the direct question that I have been asked on multiple times, which you have to be as an administrator kind of brave enough to answer directly and then explain further, is how is this going to improve test scores? Is the question that I, as an administrator, that I get. And you got to be brave enough to say, well, the best way to improve test scores is to kind of guess at the kinds of questions you're going to have and then practice those questions. So in that way, this is probably not going to directly increase test scores. And you have to say, and if you want to build on the types of school that people want to come to, you've got to build the culture of a campus. And so the answer to that, you heard the way that Erin, you could just see, doesn't everyone want to be in Erin's classroom, right? This is amazing. And the reason for that is that he is able to run a class and understand that there are times for accountability. And what you get from accountability is compliance. And there are times for systems around learning where you want students to be creative. And the way you do that is to be collaborative, where he's saying, this is your printer. Have at it. Or I don't actually know how to get all these prints done today. Do you? And you're collaborating with this student in the same way that Erin and I collaborate. And that it's not so much about saying yes or no, but about dreaming together and thinking through how can we do things that we hadn't done before. And to answer those sort of complicated questions, you need learning systems and not systems based off accountability. So that, I think from an administrator standpoint, it does take a little bit of backbone on that. Culture is important for a school, and that culture actually will probably result in higher test scores, but it's more of a long-term gain that you're going to play in that way. And you have to sell that message if you do believe, like I believe, that schools have souls. So that's my short answer.
Yes. That's it. That's a great answer. And it's clear for me as even a parent that is the culture of the school. the school does have a soul. And so that permeates everything. And I think even parents who, so just from the parent perspective, also parents that don't necessarily have the kid that is Aaron's TA still are walking by, kind of looking at what's going on and thinking, oh, this is really good, interesting work that's happening. And that's another thing that I would say is important, is that parents feel the impact that the school is having on students, whether your kid is that kid or not. So that's awesome.
Neesha, can I say one more thing? Just
yeah.
that just to build on what you're saying is how surprised people are. And I think this is unfortunate for anyone that's listening that's part of schools, that people are surprised that people are doing work that matters in schools. We're like, you're like that's what shocks people, is like, wow, you're building something that people are going to actually use. It should not be so surprising in a world of school. And that maybe just those people that are in this team together here having this conversation could start to hack that school is more than glorified daycare, that there is a reason why we're here together, and that we can help students start to build a foundation of self that leads to the opportunities that come later.
Yes, thank you for saying that. I didn't mean to say it like that, but you did. You got me to squirm, because I have said things like that before, but not at this school. And but it's important, because I think we all ask our kids, "What'd you do at school today?" "Nothing." "Did you have a good day?" "No, it was boring." And it's this, it's this thing that continuously comes into your head, and then to see these kinds of projects happening really does make a difference. And then there is something about kids just say that all the time too. So I know that Jen had her hand up. I think you want to jump in there and say something.
Yeah, as one of the co-founders, and having watched the first schools bringing e-NABLE into their classrooms, I'd like to talk a little bit about how Michael was talking about how he has to explain how test scores are going to improve. I think that administrators also need to realize that e-NABLE is giving teachers a project that shows these students who normally hate math or science, or think that they aren't ever going to understand technology, a way to bring it into the classroom that gives them a purpose for learning and gets them excited about learning. If you've got a kid who absolutely hates fractions, can't wrap their head around it, you give them, hey, here's a picture of this little girl. This is her hand. We need to figure out how to make this thing fit her. This is what fractions are good for. This is what measuring is good for. This is why you need to know how to work with numbers. And at the end of the project, they are going, holy cow, I used math. And now a little girl in Nigeria has a hand. And over the years, I've had teachers who have emailed or messaged me and say, I had these young girls who really don't feel confident in science, who are now like, they're leading the way in making after school clubs for building hands and doing STEM work that they didn't even know that they were interested in. It's a lot of the STEM stuff before e-NABLE seemed really to be boy focused. Let's build a catapult, let's build, things that girls are taught that we're not supposed to be interested in. But most of us are quite interested in launching Barbie shoes at our brother with a catapult, I'm not gonna lie. But as a society, we tell girls, you're supposed to be a teacher, a librarian, a blah, blah, blah. You're not supposed to be an engineer. You're supposed to be, doing other things. But now explaining to girls that producing prosthetics from a 3D printer is engineering. You are an engineer now. Like, you're in 4th grade and you are now an engineer, and you're a girl, and you can use this experience and grow up and make this your career if you want. But there's been, you know, for a good 4 or 5 years, a lot of tweets and social media posts about how they've got students in 3rd and 4th grade who are just overjoyed at the fact that they had no idea that they even wanted to be an engineer when they grew up. And I think when we get them using math and science and technology at a younger age and starting in elementary school, and giving them a purpose for learning it, it's not just because in 6th grade you have to take this certain test and you have 45 minutes to do it, and we have to get good test scores or our school doesn't get the funding. And it's about, we can do this math right now and you can change somebody's life. Before e-NABLE, I don't think that really existed.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for adding that. And you're so right, Stephen, you know, about bringing different kids that say different things about themselves. They've put themselves in a box, as Michael said earlier, as early as 3rd and 4th grade, and don't see themselves as the engineer, or getting all genders to the table as well. So yeah, thank you for adding that. So we actually had a question that I wanted to share out loud, and the question is for Andrea. The question is, does the summer program utilize the engineering design process? Is there iteration around specific recipients' needs?
Yeah, so I chatted it, but I'll share it out for everybody.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see the
No,
chat.
no problem.
Yeah.
So in the summer, no, we don't use any more engineering kind of reiterative design or any prototyping elements to it. The summer is really, it's a 5 to 6 week program, depending on how long the summer is. To give you a little bit more context, my school is year round. We don't have a summer vacation. We serve very low at-risk students, or students generally come in at a 3rd, 4th grade reading and math level, and they're in 9th grade. So we really have a lot of barriers against us that I've honestly not really, I would say, probably helped the e-NABLE program really develop our roots, because a lot of the times we had those students, a lot of people are talking about, think they're bad at science, think they're bad at math, and they come into the e-NABLE space and they're like, wait, this is science, this is engineering, I can do this. I'm like, yeah, you can do it. I mean, you might not know your multiplication tables, but you know how to use a CAD program, you know what I mean? So it is very empowering for them at times. So summer, it is more them getting familiar with just e-NABLE as an organization. I talk about it a little bit in the phase 1, which you could consider the class, but it is really more focused on just essentials of 3D printing, learning basic, CAD, slicing, and printer upkeep, and just basic printing. In the summer, we focus on the prosthetics. If we don't have a user, we also partner with other people. Matt Campana, if some of you know the name. He does really big, massive build events. So we sometimes print the hands for them. So it is for the students to get familiar with the history of e-NABLE, the different hands we've had that might be in style, you could say, or out of style at this point. And also sometimes even help us with developing better uses of our hands. I mean, some of you might know the Drinky Pinky. It helps a little bit with just stabilizing the hand so people can grab a drink. And our students are trying to make that better with a little lever and some magnets, something that was a little bit off topic, but it was all in the good fun of making an e-NABLE prosthetic a little bit better. Then our best lab technicians in the after school program, that's phase 3, they learn more reader design, prototyping, designing lab processes. So we have a little bit of industrial engineering in there. And we always want to include a research project. And this semester we were going to develop different type of protocols to print different materials. Right now we mainly focus on PLA and ABS, but we've seen that a lot of other TPUs, flexibles, nylon have become more popular, but they're a little bit more finicky to print with. So we want to design these protocols, but teachers come and go, assistants come and go. We really need the students to solidify and make these documents so they can pass on the knowledge to whoever comes afterwards.
That's really cool. So these documents that they have, that your students have put together, can we make those, are those available? Can we make those available to participants?
That would be a John question because that's maybe like our lab management.
The answer is yes.
The answer is yes.
It's-
Okay, so it's
all
just our
open source.
Airtable.
It's
Okay.
all meant
Yeah,
to
so
be
it's
spread
all
around.
our Airtable. It's all on there. You can really see how we've divided up our lab materials, and they can input pictures. Amazon orders. You know, I mentioned it before. Our lab really, I came in knowing nothing, and everyone kind of found their place. I'm not a very technical person. I can print something, but as soon as the printer breaks, I try to fix it, and usually that's more Melvin's forte. I'm more of a lab manager. I have all the materials, everything's organized, everyone knows where to go. And really the students developing this sort of organizational technique really made my job easier, because now I know what parts we need, I know where the link is, I know how much it costs. So really putting ownership on them to make the lab better also makes the, I guess, adults' life better in the lab, which is really nice.
If I can just follow up on that. So it turns out that Andrea, who has just radically enhanced and augmented what we do, has got the nerve to be going, last I heard, going back to graduate school in the fall.
We'll see.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Melvin is currently happily stranded in Costa Rica because of the coronavirus. And of course, our classes aren't meeting. But Melvin's mission right now is, in fact, to pull together all of those materials, including, Andrea, your teaching materials, if
My
you're willing to
curriculum.
share them,
Yes.
so that we can share them out. I think it's, you know, I think all of us recognize that what we do in the classroom is meant to echo all over the world. And it's a really good moment to do that because we're not actually in the classroom right now. And frankly, it's not clear when we're going to get back to the classroom. So spreading it around is an important part of what we do, and means that all of the good work we do within our four walls is amplified as it goes out from those four walls.
So just a little plug, I guess. I am, as I said at the beginning, my goal was to integrate the e-NABLE into the school curriculum. So I did design a curriculum. It's a high school, middle school, I would say kind of hybrid. As I said, my students come a little bit lower, so I have to adjust some of like the math and science portion of it to fit their needs. It's project-based. It's 5 to 6 projects per semester, depending on what the needs of the lab were, because the class is very tied into helping the lab, and I guess encourage the lab to continue on with whatever research or products they're making. Products in this case, I'm thinking hands or anything else. So that will be available on the e-NABLE Hub. It is an open source curriculum. It'll be in total 6 different projects that you'll be able to do in your class as an elective or just kind of as a one-off project. Each project focuses on a different aspect. So one is printer upkeep, one is using CAD systems, and all of them are interconnected at the end. So you can do them all as a nice little story or as separate chapters, and that will be available in June-ish. And I mean, open source, feel free to comment, feel free to make it better. I'm sure you guys can all make it better.
That's awesome and so great. And I see that Jeremy dropped in, just for everybody listening, the e-NABLE Hub URL, and we will definitely share that out as show notes as well as all of the other resources that people have been talking about. Shashi, I want to go to you for a moment and go back to the work that you did with the Eagle Scouts and just get some, I know that one of the things that Andrea just said was it really matters what materials you use, because some materials are finicky. And Aaron's advice about batch printing and the Google Docs that they've created. So I'd love to get your tips and tricks. What do you wish that you had known, and what can you share with our participants today?
That's a really interesting question. I was thinking, as Aaron was speaking, he kind of was as if he was reading from my notes here, because I feel you, man. I experience a lot of the same things with the Eagle Scouts. And something that Michael said really resonated for me as well. Something that that we try to do with the Eagles is, there's if you tell them what to do, they'll comply. They'll follow instructions, and they'll be dependent on you. We have the same thing in the corporate world. If you beat up people too hard, you get a culture of compliance, not a culture of commitment. So I wish I had known early on how to create that culture of commitment with my Eagles. And I think I found a way to do this. And I don't have any printer tricks or anything like that for you here, but I have 2 or 3 things that I do. Number one is in school, for better or for worse, it's a environment of permissions. This is what you can do. This is what you're supposed to do at this time. This is the test you're supposed to go to. A lot of my students don't feel like they have permission to innovate, not even the Eagles. So the first thing I ask them, the first thing I try to do is release them from that. I give them permission to innovate. I give them permission to experiment, to fail, as Aaron had said, to try things out that they think would be, an amazing adder. And we a lot of times it works out amazingly well, more so than even I thought would be possible. I wish I knew how much the students were capable of initially. I wish I knew how much I didn't expect, how low the bar was for me, for the students. So the tips that I have are around that. Set the bar higher than your comfort zone. And then raise it 10% more. Make sure that they have permission to innovate. Give them flexibility. Let them try things that they otherwise wouldn't. In fact, the way that I would say it is find their superpower and invite them to use it in this project. And even if it's not what you would normally think, like TJ, the Eagle that I'm working with now, his superpower was music. And I'm not a musical person necessarily, but the way that he spoke about it and the passion that he brought, the way that he married it into his Eagle project was breathtaking. And he feels like he can take all of these different facets of him now and put them together and make a difference. Once you've done that, don't treat them like students. Treat them like your colleagues. Treat them like the best colleague you've ever had to work with, and respect their skills. Give them some responsibility. Give them goals. Help them through the constraints, and they will make magic for you. And if I could tell myself these few things when I started doing this two years ago with Eagles, I think we would have had many more interesting outcomes here.
That's great. Such a great list there, not just for bringing the e-NABLE program into your school, but for life, for the life of a parent, for the life of a teacher, for any of the work that you're doing, right, is go in with higher expectations. Trust the kids, I think, is really what you're saying, more than you probably do. So thank you, Shashi, for that. Amanda, I want to go to you next, and same question for you, really. Like, what do you wish that you had known, whether that's tips or tricks or a challenge that came up that, had you known about, you would have solved for sooner than on the back end?
As far as what I wish I'd known, I am also very novice. A lot of you guys have been saying what I was thinking too, like very novice with the 3D printing in general. So a lot of the issues I do have are on the end of troubleshooting, maintenance, and it's a little harder to rely on the little guys to help figure that part out. So it does lean a little bit more on me and my colleagues. But as far as the tips, I actually wrote down, give them a chance no matter what age, they'll surprise you. So it's kind of the same thing that Shashi was saying with high school kids, is what just in our maker space in general and with the 3D printing, like what they will grab onto and do, and yes, raise the bar. Like we were talking about before with when they were able to actually assemble the hands, like it really did get some of them thinking about like, well, what if they want to move only 2 fingers and things like that. So giving them a chance to ask those questions, and they'll surprise you. So I had that same thought.
Oops, sorry. I didn't realize I wasn't muted before. That's great. Thank you, Amanda. So we are in the home stretch now of our time together. I can't believe how quickly it's gone, but I would like to now just do a rapid fire around this group and ask you all the same question, which is, what is the one thing that you brought to the table as a teacher that led to your success? Because all of you have had success. You've all taken the time to do this, and you've all shared stories about the impact that it's had on your students. So you can say a little bit more about the impact that it had, but also what do you think that as a teacher, you're really glad that you brought to the table when you went into this experience. And I don't know who wants to go first here. I didn't set this one up and pick an order. Anybody want to go first?
Actually, I'll go first because
Okay.
I can prove my point. What came to mind is that I've made a career in the classroom and elsewhere of doing stuff that was half-baked and embarrassing. And in this particular business and in the classroom, I think that if the teacher is not willing to do that, the students are not going to be willing to do that. And yet that is the essential skill. So it's a strange kind of role modeling, but that's what I bring to the table, I think.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that that is exactly the attitude that would make you successful in the work that you're doing. Who would like to go next? I feel like the teacher in this room.
I'll go.
Okay.
So in my role in Intel, we were all asked what our superpower is. And then, mine is kind of catalyzing action. I can find people and places or people and resources and kind of bring them together and get them to do things that they otherwise didn't think that they thought were possible. And it's just it's like kind of the opposite of the boiling the frog example. You come together, you do a little bit here, you add on to it a little bit more and a little bit more, and pretty soon you've done something pretty big. And someone said this to me just literally 2 days ago, that I have the ability to find a reason to say yes, even then when any sane person would say no. So maybe that's what I bring.
That's great. And I think that's also so key, is that you have to have that risk taker mentality in a way to, I'm just going to try this. I'm going to go out on a limb and try this. And that's often what makes us successful at doing what we do. So Jen, actually, I know that you have something to share here, so maybe you could go next, and then we'll keep going around the circle.
Yes. So I am not a traditional teacher. I have never been in the classroom officially, but I have seen how e-NABLE works for the last 7 years. And I have noticed that the classrooms that are really thriving in this are classrooms where the teachers are making it, where they're modeling the e-NABLE community, where you know the strengths of this student is art, not math. You know this student is phenomenal at math, but struggles with language. And taking the opportunity to give each of the students a role in the e-NABLE project is essential, I think. If you look at the e-NABLE community, when we first had some of our first designs, we had just teachers and students and parents and recipients, jewelers, French teachers, artists, circus performers, and musicians, all trying to come up with these designs for new and improved hands. And one of the first problems we came upon was when the fingers close, or when you bend your wrist, the fingers have to close, and we couldn't figure out for the life of us tensioning. And there were all these crazy different contraptions they were trying. And it turns out that it was a musician who figured it out. And he was like, I have this guitar, and it's got strings and it's got pegs, and if we tighten that peg, that tightens a finger. And we were like, the engineers are like, why didn't I think of that? Because you're not seeing the world that way. So giving the kids an opportunity, maybe you've got a kid who is really, really struggling with the math part of it all. So let the kids who excel at that teach those kids what they're doing in the process, but maybe that kid is more inclined to be the one who takes the request for the themed hand for an R2D2 themed arm, and they are the kid that's in CAD designing that, so that you've got a collaboration for this one design that goes out, and then by the time it's given to the recipient, it is an actual group effort where each kid has not been sitting there full of anxiety that, you know, their part is they have to figure out how long this thumb has to be to fit this person, and theirs is that, you know, I have to figure out what size to make R2D2 fit on this person's arm, on the gauntlet part. And so I think that is something that I would suggest when people bring e-NABLE into the classroom, is making it so that it's not a struggle, and kind of seeking out or paying attention to what their strengths are, so that when you do the project, everybody is interested in helping. If you have a kid who is loathing this project, even though it ends up helping somebody in the end, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Jen, one of the things that I have come to know about you as one of your superpowers is how you just open your arms out wide and bring everybody into the table. And so I know that, you know, not a classroom teacher, but I would say that that's what I see you do. And one of our members that are watching right now just said, "Oh, Jen, yes, that's the type of analogous thinking that is so essential to creation and innovation." I love that example. So thank you for sharing it. Aaron, would you like to share?
Yeah, you know, listening to people talk about the strengths, I think it all kind of goes along the same lines of just being able and being willing to be a partner with your students. So much of, I think, successful moments in the classroom come from, you know, that opportunity to work on a problem together. And I really think kids really perk up when they hear a teacher go, you know, I've never done this before, but you want to give this a shot? You know, let's try this. That novelty in the problem solving process, and inviting students to be your partners in that is where I think a lot of success has come. Because then the other thing that happens is the students see themselves as partners in that process, and then they'll see those other students that maybe might be struggling, and they'll take on that role, right? They'll be able to go and do it. So that was something I figured out like early on, just from the technical aspect. I can't run and problem solve 9 different 3D printers in the room, and that's not possible. And I don't think that's my role necessarily, right? With the technology, it's to empower students to be the ones that can do that. And I think those moments ring true when you see like this. Just this year, I remember one of my students found a 3D printer that was in another room that was kind of gathering dust in the back of the room, and bugged the teacher in that room to be like, "Hey, I think I can fix that." And then all of a sudden, like the next, a couple days later, he bought I said, "Well, cool, I'll order a replacement hot end for it and we'll get it going." And he says, "Oh no, I got one coming. It'll be here tomorrow." And he like went and looked up the part that it needed, and had ordered filament for it himself, and took it upon himself to be the leader in that next room, you know, to be able to pass that on, because I think he saw himself as being invited into a situation where he was valued as a partner, and knew that he had a role that he could fulfill, and something that he could do right then and there, you know, taking the skills that he had learned and applying them into another situation. So I really like that type of interaction. And that's, you know, it started with, you know, with a TA or 2 TAs, but when we get into these projects, it's really neat to see us problem solve together. And when one group gets stuck, to become the facilitator of like, not jumping in, you know, real close with the lens on that problem, but to look around the room and see who's gotten past that hurdle already, and then to try to connect groups. You know, I think a lot of times students work in a group setting, and sometimes they'll feel like, well, that's just their group and they're supposed to work on their project in their group. But it's okay for kids to leave their group and go over to another group and try to help problem solve, you know, and things become really authentic when we're in the middle of this project, where you know, everybody's starting at a different point at the beginning of the period. Everybody's ending at a different point in the period. But as a group, collectively, we're working towards this common goal. And it's got kind of a really neat feel. And we'll just start classes when we're in the midst of the project with a quick check-in, whip around the room real quick. Hey, where are all the groups at? What are some of your challenges that you've encountered? And then when groups share out a challenge, it's cool to just kind of offer up, like, cool, has anybody come up with a solution to that? And to hear the kids kind of jump in and go like, oh yeah, you know, like there's confusion sometimes over which finger goes with which. Or stringing is actually a pretty difficult thing, takes a lot of dexterity. And you'll find experts, kids that are really good at being able to string the hand or come up with ways to fit or unfit. Like when you push a pin into a hole, sometimes it's hard to get it back out. But you know, getting those kids teamed up as partners together in the project is really, really neat. And it's a real powerful experience in the class.
That's phenomenal, Aaron. And I think really what you're saying and what a couple of the other panelists have said is something like what you brought to the table is this inner confidence in yourself and knowing that you didn't have to be the sage on the stage. And that is clearly so important in empowering your students to do it, and it's just such an important thing to bring to the table before you get started. So thank you. Michael, anything to add there? You're on mute.
And that's all I have to say about that. I think that like the one thing, or there's like three things I'd say that I feel like I brought. And the most important one is helping to set a culture on our campus. And I like Maya Angelou's got this great line, says that it's a great story about her talking to Tupac saying, do you know how important you are? If you know that story. And it is, I mean, I think for all of us listening to Aaron talk, we can see, like, we all realize how important he is. Like but he does that to students as well. Like, do you know how important you are? And that perspective on what that does for a school, or to be honest, any organization, when the people that are in that organization realize sincerely how important they are, it changes the way people act on campus. So setting that culture, I do think that as a leader on campus, that is your job. And you should be thinking, modeling really, that type of behavior in an organization to be able to have these sort of things happen. You know, the other thing is maybe just like a little unfortunate that your role is to be stander in front of fire hose and keep keep our innovators on our site being able to continue to innovate, as there are times where people ask of teachers and students and schools things that maybe conflict with some of the work that we're trying to do. So I feel like it was important for me to be able to tell our story over and over and over again, and that is the way in which we battle back against that. And this is important. Our students are important. This work is important, and this is why. And the other one is just relationship builder. Like, one of the things that I can do is that I can meet Neesha. You know, I can meet people. I can bring these opportunities on our campus and to our team and to our students to be able to offer them new things. And I guess then the other piece of that is just being excited. So it's like, I'm just really like, Aaron has to kick me out of his classroom sometimes, you know, or I realize like I should be probably finishing that board report, which I would rather not do, because it's just exciting to be able to do a lot of the things that are happening all across our campus. I know I said three. Here's one last thing I want to mention, is that e-NABLE is not a curriculum. So that one thing that we need to do is inspire teachers, you know, as people who can sort of integrate this kind of work into our system that isn't curriculum based, but not everybody is going to feel comfortable with that. And Aaron playing this role is essential. Already on our campus, we have more people that are comfortable doing this kind of work and operating in these spaces of unknown that are necessary to create. I saw that the beehive. I like that idea, right? This idea of, well, we don't actually know all the answers, and that's actually a good thing, because we can all collaborate on figuring them out. And it's okay that you don't have consensus on your campus to be able to start with innovation. It's fine. It actually knows that you're moving forward like into areas that are important when you could find at least one person that is the Aaron Satilli that is doing that work, so that the rest of us could feel more comfortable about trying it too. Like, oh, he's fine. He didn't get fired. He's still around. That's great. So maybe I can try that also, is I think an important thing to empower those people on our campuses to do those sort of things. So
I cannot agree with you more, and I can't even begin to emphasize how much I get to see all of these qualities in you, Michael, just as the person that's always willing to meet with, you know, a parent out of left field and take that time. And then you're always that guy that's going up to a student and making sure that they know that they are heard and that they are seen and that they are cared for. So I see that all the time in you. So thank you. Thank you for being the principal of an amazing school that my own kids go to. And thank you for joining this panel and for sharing that. Jen, I think that you had something that you wanted to add there, and then we'll go to, I know we have just a couple of minutes left here, then we'll go to Andrea and Amanda, and then we will wrap it up with a special offer for all of our attendees. So I hope that you stick around for another couple of minutes. Okay, Jen.
Yeah, I just wanted to also touch on the fact that e-NABLE isn't just about 3D printing. e-NABLE is a movement. It's an idea. It's, you know, finding ways to innovate to help others, whether that's with cardboard and duct tape, helping, you know, the janitor who keeps losing his keys make a rack where he can put his keys so he knows where they're at every day. You know, maybe there's something that they can use recycled materials to make to help a student who struggles with, you know, mobility, to be able to sit in their chair easier. It's not always about 3D printing, and I think e-NABLE started out with a 3D printing kind of message because we started with 3D printed prosthetic hands, but it's important to remember that schools who don't have 3D printers can bring e-NABLE in as an example of how you can use your ideas and your imaginations to help other people with what you have. Maybe you don't have a 3D printer, but maybe you can get a donation of pizza boxes and tin cans and popsicle sticks and come up with a way to, you know, maybe there's a person who's shorter than everybody else in the class. Maybe you guys can come up with a, you know, grabbing the large cans from the kitchen and making a stool out of it with something that you have where they can reach their own books and they don't have to ask for help anymore. It's about hive mind collectively thinking up solutions for everyday problems that can not only help with that person in that moment, but if they were to share that idea that they came up with, somebody clear across the world who's short and can't reach their books at the top of their locker too, could make a tin can, cardboard, recycled materials stool that they can use too. So I think that's what I would like to remind people is e-NABLE isn't just 3D printing.
Yeah, such an absolutely great point, Jen. So Andrea, would you like to just share a little bit about what you brought to the table? You do such amazing work with high school students. What's your secret sauce?
Oh, so going back to the classroom, I think what's really important is that getting into the context of a 3D printing class, it's very different to what they experience in school all the time, right? They're used to be graded on, is this right or wrong? And 3D printing class, that's not really the case, right? There's no really right or wrong. I mean, unless the printer is on fire, then there's an issue, right? But you're creating, you're innovating, right? So there is no right or wrong. So really showing them that perseverance, and I think just as a part of science is it's okay to be wrong. What's important is how you move forward from that. How are you gonna not learn from that and then go to the next step. You know, I think a lot of my kids came into the class thinking, oh, this is just like the videos I've seen online. I just get a design, it'll print like that, easy. And then, you know, they do their first print and they're like, Miss, nothing's coming out. And I'm like, oh, the nozzle's clogged. And they're like, wait, that happens? I'm like, yep, it happens more than you would like it to, you know, and it might not stick to the bed, and you might have messed up your STL file. And when you slice it, it's completely horrible in it. You get a huge hawk's nest, you know, and it's showing them that it is okay for that to happen. And a lot of what other people are saying, it's okay for things to go wrong. It's okay for you as a teacher not to know. As long as you use that as a teaching tool to show students, how do you get out of that? Because a lot of times students get to the, okay, I'm stuck, and they don't know, okay, how do I move forward? As a teacher, it's my responsibility. Okay, we're stuck. This is how we get unstuck. We either ask for help, we look for resources, or we just figure it out ourselves working as a team. But it's important to really persevere and not just let things flop, because that's not what science is about. That's not what innovation is about. And that's not what the idea of e-NABLE is about.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you, Andrea. So I just want to say to the attendees that are here, we might not necessarily have your email address. And I know that I did say that we would send out all of the resources. So feel free to, in the chat, just to the panelists, send your email address, and I'll be sure that we capture that and get you the resources that you need. Amanda.
I had two things I wrote down as we're talking. Resonated with everyone, the whole modeling that it's okay to make mistakes. And at the grade or elementary school level, I often quote Miss Frizzle of Magic School Bus, take chances, make mistakes, get messy. That's kind of my lab mantra. And then the other part of it is being, and Michael used the word backbone earlier, having that backbone to be the advocate and standing up, I mean, how many years ago this was now, but like standing up, yeah, we could spend the money, like we can find money for these 3D printers. I think it's gonna be something important. Or as we're moving into makerspace, like standing up that it's innovative. It's not something that, you know, we couldn't find very many other elementary schools to look at when we were building ours out. So like being able to kind of stand up for that is something I think I've done okay at.
I'm sure you've done a lot more than okay at it. I'm sure that it's made all the difference in the world. So with that, I just want to wrap up. I know that we could continue going here, and I want to just say thank you to everyone that has participated here. And if you've dropped your email address in, we'll definitely get the resources to you. And I think Jeremy also sent out a link that will allow you to go directly to the resources. We'll post them there probably tomorrow morning or so. It takes a little while for us to get the recording of this up onto YouTube. And before we all leave, I just want to share that BitSpace has created a course with e-NABLE. So Jen has been a co-collaborator in this creation process. And the course really allows you to, in a remote learning situation that we're all in right now, using not a 3D printer, but whatever you've got in the house, to deliver some empathy, engineering, anatomy challenges to your students. And you can do that either by watching the course and then delivering, we'll model for you how to do it and give you all the information that you need. Or you can take the videos right from the course and deliver those right to your students. We are doing we wanted to make this as easy as possible for people. So we've made the whole thing 90% off. So that makes it $5 at the moment. Half of our proceeds go to e-NABLE, and e-NABLE is using that, the funding that comes in to pay for the materials that schools and students will need to bring this program into their schools. So I am linking that whole thing for you in the chat, and I will also send it out, but I hope that you take advantage of this. We're really hoping to keep that price point down as low as we possibly could. And yeah, so thank you all so much. Thank you to the panelists for joining. I think this has been a great conversation. We really did set out to give people actionable advice on how to bring the e-NABLE program into their students, and you guys have just way over delivered. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Neesha.
Yeah, all right.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you everyone.
Yeah, everybody have a
Thank you
nice
so
day.
much. Have an
Thank
amazing
you.
time.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.